Hi guys, welcome back to another video. Today's going to be a slight update video on the green tree pythons that I have here. In the last video you saw the middle green tree python that I had purchased, and that was the only individual that I had currently. Now over the last 4 and a bit months I have recently gotten 2 extras. Today I just wanted to discuss a few little tips and tricks with keeping the green tree pythons and or feeding, because I know I've got a few comments on people wanting to know how easy they are to feed and some of the tips and tricks to get them actually eating food, or at least eating different varieties of food or problematic. So I'll go over a little bit of tips and tricks, but I thought I'd station you guys above all the 3 green tree pythons and just show you what they're currently in. Now, the main thing with green tree pythons and feeding is making them comfortable. If they're not comfortable in their environment, they're probably not going to eat at all. Now, with these green tree pythons, when I did first purchase them, they probably took about a week and a half, almost 2 weeks before I could actually get them eating comfortably, and they were pretty hesitant when I first got them. Now, the biggest thing with green tree pythons, because they are more of a reclusive animal, they don't exactly want to be touched and played with. They don't necessarily need a lot of contact or handling. Now, if you do that, that will probably cause a little bit more stress than they're used to or wanting, and you will probably that result in being stressed out and not wanting to eat. Now, I personally have had no issues with feeding these guys, and I've probably been fairly lucky when it comes to feeding and handling these guys. They've all got an extremely good temperament, which I'll show you in a second, and they're extremely easy to feed. Now, some of the tips and tricks when feeding, a lot of people will use different methods, such as using different things to scent and food. I'll show you a few of the utensils I use just for feeding, and then we'll get on to what other stuff I use. So, if you can see here, if it focuses at all, that some of the things I use for feeding, you've got your feeding tongs, pretty useful. Now, this is probably something unusual that you probably weren't expecting to see. And then you've just got my feeding tub. Now I'll focus it back on the snakes, but the main things with those utensils is the cup itself is pretty much just to thaw out the animals, whether you're using mice, rats, quails, whatever you're using. That's nothing special. The tongs, of course, everyone knows what that's for. That's the feeding utensil and what you're going to be feeding them with. Now, the other thing that's a little bit strange was the syringe. I've personally found that using the syringe, not on the animals of course, but of the prey items that you're feeding them, comes in very useful and it's pretty handy. Now, what I recommend is injecting whatever you're feeding your snake, particularly green tree pythons, with water. Doesn't have to be anything fancy, doesn't have to be any dechlorinated water. I mean, I personally don't use dechlorinated or anything, I just use straight out of the tap, but that's dependent on where you're located. And inject it straight into the prey item before you feed them. It's a sure way of making sure that your pythons are getting the recommended amount of water. I personally spray my animals every day, but I don't really see them drinking from the spray, nor do I really see them drinking out of their water bowls, which you can see at the bottom of their enclosures. So once a week or once every 5 days, or however often you feed your snakes, you're going to be guaranteeing a way of water into them. Now, the amount, completely up to you. I mean, a lot of the times it ends up getting squeezed out, so probably the more the merrier. With this one right here, I inject into its prey items, I believe 3 milliliters of water, and the little fuzzy mouse is pretty chockers. And then with these 2 other guys either side, I inject, I think it's a 1.5 mil, so just about half the amount. But that then, like I said, guarantees a way of water. Now, in terms of getting them to eat, if they're not exactly good eaters or very food aggressive or responsive, is to, in a way, harass them with the food. It's get the tongs out and pretty much dangle it near them, irritate them. You want to go in and basically nudge them and irritate. Now, he was only fed the other day, so he doesn't really care that I have tongs, but you can see he does get pretty responsive when he sees the tongs in there. Now, it's irritate them, and it will basically guarantee a feeding response or a aggression response from you irritating them and tapping, stroking, knocking them on the tail. Oftentimes that will get them going. If that doesn't, a lot of people do use something called chick down, or just use quail or chicken, frozen chicken, food of course, that you would normally feed the snake, but they'd scent the item. Being green tree pythons that they sit in the trees, they do predominantly eat birds, and being captive, bred and raised, they are oftentimes fed onto rodents, and initially that's not oftentimes what they want. Once they're eating that, they're fine, but getting them used to that can be an issue. So scenting their prey item with quail or chicken feathers, or just chicken itself, will oftentimes get them used to feeding a little bit easier. That's pretty much all I wanted to cover with the feeding, but this is just a general update on the pythons as well. Now, as you guys, like I said, would have known, I originally had the middle one. Now, this middle one is now going through its ontogenic color change, and it's looking pretty fancy. It did start off probably, I would almost say smaller than this one, and within a few months has quite substantially packed on some size. Now, you can see they all are basically perching on their perches, which I custom made. I might actually do a video on how I made these tubs, which are pretty handy to have, considering when you're using arboreal snakes. Now, the general update on these guys is that this one is they're all Australian green tree pythons, excluding this one, which is Australian cross in a sense. When I say Australian cross, its full lineage is not fully Australian. It does have some Papua New Guinean genes in it, whereas these other two are 100% Australian green tree pythons. Now, as these ones do age, they will obviously turn green, as you can see with this one right now. And I'll see if I can actually take him off, bring him up a little bit closer to the camera. And you can see just the color change on him. Now, all these white spots or dots or scales that you can see, they're all new and have recently come on to the snake. And you can see that head. See if I can get it to focus a bit more. You see that head slowly starting to change color. A little bit hard to focus with these guys, but that face, there you go. So very interesting to watch that color change, and that will hopefully over the next few weeks and months, he or she will darken up considerably. And as you can see, they're really friendly. Now, some green tree pythons, or most green tree pythons, are known for having a pretty bad attitude. These guys, I've raised them in a way I handle pretty frequently. Don't necessarily pull them off the sticks, but as you can see, I give them a mess around on the stick and just get them used to human interaction, which does help considerably when feeding, maintenance, cleaning, stuff like that. I'll pull all of them out so you can have a look. This one, really nice patterns. All, like I said, very friendly, extremely nice patterns on them. A lot of patterning compared to the one I've got in the corner here. I basically went 3 spectrums. This one is supposed to turn out all green with a few white dots on it, whereas this one currently, which I have in front of the camera, is supposed to have a white dorsal line and heavy speckled white spots on him. And the other one is supposed to have the same white spots and speckling, but I took a bit of a lucky dip and purchased a snake which didn't have a lot of patterning on it. So it's a bit of a lucky dip when it comes to picking out these snakes, because you don't know what they're going to look like as they get older. But if you see this one, very reduced pattern on him compared to the previous one that I just showed you. and it'll be very interesting to see these guys develop as they get older. That middle one is the first one that I've seen actually starting to change, and that one is about 7 months old now. So it usually happens at around the year mark, and it's a very, very exciting change, and you can slowly see it happen along with these videos, which I'll upload on a regular basis and keep you guys up to date. That's all I really wanted to discuss with this one, just a general update on all the snakes and show you how everything's going. Mainly just focused on the feeding and some tips and tricks. That's all I'll go over in this video, and look forward to the next one.